Two very rich American men played huge roles in World War II. One helped us win the war in a big way, and the other almost made us lose the war because he was helping the Nazis, believe it or not. The craziest part is people only recognize the one who helped the German Nazis. Welcome to the terrifying truth about Henry Ford. Few names in history shine as brightly as Henry Ford. And there's another guy that's well known to some named LeTourneau. And today we're going to explore the legacies of these two industrial giants who reshaped the world drastically in like a huge way, but in very different ways. First, let's meet Henry Ford, the guy with over $160 billion at the time of his death. His story was a story of innovation, determination. Most people would definitely say he's one of the most influential men in all of American history. But was his impact like a positive thing, or was it more of a negative thing? I don't know. We're going to talk about that. He was originally born into the life of a farmer in 1863, and he was a curious kid, maybe like you, and it propelled him from, rural Michigan to the forefront of the Industrial Revolution, which is crazy. He had a lot of vision, and he had a lot of revolutionary ideas, and his goal was to make the automobile accessible to every American, which he accomplished, obviously. And in 1908, his vision took form as the Model T, the little Model T driving around. It was like really affordable. It forever changed the way that we move as people. It was a big deal. And he was a genius too. We all hear the famous stories about his innovation regarding the assembly line, which dramatically lowered the cost. It made mass production a reality. But at the same time, if you really dig into it, it's really interesting because his legacy is very complicated. And there's like these brilliant parts and there's these really controversial parts. And if you ask me, there's kind of some evil parts that we're going to talk about in just a minute. One of the good things he did was kind of revolutionize workers' rights. And, he had like a $5 a day wage, which doesn't sound like much now, but it was kind of a big deal back then. But on the negative side, he was known for being a massive anti-Semitic person. He did not like Jewish people at all. He also took a hard line against labor unions. I can kind of see both sides of that. And he kind of embodies this duality, of this like visionary industrialist, but also not caring about people. And it's complicated, but beneath his legacy of innovation, there really is some darker things that a lot of people don't know about. We're going to talk about it. And by the way, if you're enjoying this content, if you like learning about business and history and all the cool things and you want to learn cool stuff, like and subscribe if you think that we've earned it. It means a lot. Now, before we get into the darker truth, let's first talk about Robert Gilmore LeTourneau. You maybe haven't heard of this guy's name. It might not ring a bell outside the realms of the heavy construction industry, but he's one of my heroes. This guy is like a legend in my mind, right? And I think you're going to really think it's interesting when I unpack his story. His legacy is really deeply embedded in the Industrial Revolution too, just like Henry Ford. He was born in 1888, and LeTourneau rose from really humble beginnings. I think he had like a 7th grade education, if I remember right. And he became this massive pioneering inventor. And he created these earth-moving machines, which laid the groundwork for all of the modern infrastructure we have. He was a road builder. He was the inventor of an offshore oil rig. He just made that up with no formal education. It's crazy. And unlike many of his contemporaries, LeTourneau viewed his work through the lens of his deep Christian faith. I mean, this guy was chasing Jesus. He was a God guy, right? He literally believed that God was his business partner. Whether you think that's delusional or not, that's how he lived his life, right? And he thought that his inventions were meant to serve humanity and honor God. And like I said, he had over 300 patents to his name. He revolutionized mining, construction, and was a big reason we're even able to win World War II because of all the weird machines this guy invented. And I'm hoping my team can find B-roll of some of these weird, huge pieces of equipment, all kinds of crazy stuff. And he worked hard for the greater good. And that's really what set him apart. And if you dive deeper into the stories of Henry Ford and LeTourneau, we're kind of compelled to ask, how do we measure the true impact of a legacy? Was Henry Ford good or bad? Well, it's a complicated question because there's hundreds of thousands of jobs created, right? But there's all this bad stuff too. And so I'm not saying there's a black and white answer, but the other way to look at it is what ripple effect you have on humanity, the people around you, the people on your team. Ford was a lot richer than RG was, but RG was balling out. It was worth $100 million 80 years ago, which is kind of crazy, but he was really uplifting humanity in really, really cool ways. And by the way, if you're enjoying this content, if you like learning about business and history and all the cool things and you want to learn cool stuff, like and subscribe if you think that we've earned it. It means a lot. Let's dig into the dark side of Henry Ford. Henry Ford's legacy as an industrial titan, totally undeniable. but it's kind of shadowed by aspects of his character and his beliefs that paint a darker picture, right, beyond the automotive side of his life. And beyond his contributions to manufacturing and like the American workforce, the way that the 40-hour work week happens, all these things that he kind of pioneered, he harbored views that were not good. He did not like Jews, like I said, massive anti-Semite, and he wasn't shy about it. This isn't like a conspiracy, it's just public. In the early 20th century, Ford stood against the United States entering into World War I, right? And he had a lot of conspiracy theories, really just blaming Jews for everything. And this wasn't just him, this was like a worldwide thing. I mean, when Germany actually started World War II and had all this anti-Semitic stuff and wanted to start killing Jews and stuff, lots of people agreed with him, and Henry Ford was one of those people. Ford even bought like a newspaper called the Dearborn Independent, and he transformed it into a platform to like hate Jewish people and published it, right? He also distributed this thing called the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. It was this document hating on Jewish people and just distributed it. He was trying to get the message out, right? It's like, stay in your lane, Ford, go build a car, But so all this stuff's happening, right? In the late 1920s, he was actually sued for libel by some Jewish people in the Jewish community, and he had to issue an apology, but he was just forced to do it. The guy didn't mean it, right? And it doesn't seem like his personal views really changed at all, as far as we can tell, right? By the 1930s, though, he was really vocal in his criticism of what he called financiers and moneylenders, right? Linking them to the New Deal in American politics and just the hatred of Jews and this global conflict and all this stuff's happening. And with all that being said, it's not that unsurprising that Ford found a really good buddy in Adolf Hitler. They were friends, they were buddies. In fact, Ford had a picture of Hitler, Hitler had a picture of Ford in his office. They thought each other were awesome. It was like a big group hug between the two of them. And he was one of Hitler's key American friends. Henry Ford is a very powerful guy. He's making all this money, he's efficient, he's like strategic, he's cutthroat, and he's helping out Hitler on the side, you know what I'm saying? So, Ford's beliefs didn't just tarnish his own legacy, but they had real impacts on his business practices as well. During the 1920s, Ford invested in buying a German car maker called Opel. It had a factory in Cologne, Germany, and that, ended up making him a bunch of money. One of the reasons he did that is because he was about to start helping the Nazis, which is crazy, and it was a multi-million-dollar business even back then. Now, let's talk about R.G. LeTourneau for a second. So unlike Henry Ford, R.G. is amazing, and his legacy is totally different. In 1929, he established R.G. LeTourneau, Inc., originally based out of Stockton, California. And he kind of set the stage for this era of innovation regarding earth-moving equipment. Now, you, living in the world today, you might not think earth-moving equipment is like really cool and it's not important. It literally changed the whole world. Like the whole infrastructure of our country, goods and services, moving to and fro, all the highways, the bridges, road building, blowing dynamite through mountains and building roads. Like he built these machines that were mind-boggling, and this is back, like I said, almost 100 years ago. And in 1935, he started this partnership with the Caterpillar Tractor Company. And if you know his whole background, it's really crazy that an uneducated kid just trying to honor God, even built this company as big as it was and did partnerships with huge companies like Caterpillar. And he had so much success. In fact, he had too much success. So by 1945, this whole partnership between R.G. LeTourneau, this genius inventor, engineer, mechanic guy who was following God and trying to help humanity, he partnered with Caterpillar. And over a decade into their relationship, Caterpillar was threatened by him, right? They perceived him as more of a competitor than a partner. And so that put some pressure and strain on the relationship. Caterpillar started building equipment to compete with all the inventions that RG invented, and there's all this business stuff happened. But it didn't change RG's mindset at all. It did change the relationship. It marked a turning point. But RG was just chasing after God, man. He was just chasing after radical generosity, which is so freaking cool. And World War II specifically proved to be like a really significant period for R.G. LeTourneau. It didn't just like bolster his business, right? Because the military is buying tons of equipment that only he made. He invented these weird machines that like make a bridge over like the water so soldiers can walk on it, and weird giant machines that chop down a whole forest. And these tires were like 10, 12, 15 feet tall. It was crazy. So he made a lot of money from that. But the partnership with Caterpillar became really instrumental in kind of that contract with the Army and the Navy. And he's really, a lot of people say, he's one of the reasons we're able to win World War II, which is so crazy, right? Whether it was bulldozers or scrapers or all these weird heavy machinery things, this guy was sketching out drawings and welding things together, trying to like honor God, which is just fascinating to me. If you think any of this is really interesting, just wait 2 more minutes when I explain R.G. LeTourneau's view on radical generosity, because it will break your brain. So R.G., he had this faith, right? And the story really isn't just about building machines. It's not about cutthroat. It's about that faith and him following God. He literally believed God was literally his business partner. Like, he would sit there within his desk, right? And his employees thought he was crazy, and he'd like talk to God and stuff. I heard a story one time about his attorney walking into his office when they're having a hard time of business, and they were like financially in a tough spot. And his attorney said, "RG, your creditors are here. You need to declare bankruptcy." And RG, scruffy voice, scribbling on his pencil, looked up and told his attorney, he goes, "You're fired." And his attorney said, "What do you mean I'm fired? I've worked for you for 20 years. And he goes, "God doesn't go bankrupt." And I tell you that story because this is the guy's mindset. He was literally like, it's impossible. We're going to succeed, right? He lived by the verse Matthew 6:33, which is, "But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." And he viewed businessmanship, being an entrepreneur, being a businessman, as a ministry. It shaped his whole life. Despite himself not being a great speaker or being formally educated, he became pretty famous to a lot of Americans. He started speaking around 1935, starting with this little Chamber of Commerce thing. He was nervous to go speak, and he speaks about God and faith and our country, America, and how we need to be generous with each other. And it kind of like went viral back then. The newspapers would talk about it. They're like, who is this guy? He'd pay his staff more than everybody else. He would fund all kinds of missions and all these weird things. He gave away tons of money. It was really, really interesting, and word started to spread. And he ended up reaching millions of people, sharing how faith can transform work and life. And he didn't just talk it, he walked it in like a huge way. He had a company magazine called Now. And he would share like his world travels, where he'd go like build villages and do all these crazy things and share the gospel. He would share stories about how much he deeply cared for his employees and his staff, and the way he would be a servant leader. They would have chapel services at work, and they just made kind of this whole walk with God thing like part of the daily routine. And with his wife, this is one of the craziest parts, they decided to live on 10% of their income and give away 90% of their income, which is pretty uncommon, I think. I'm pretty sure that's uncommon. It's kind of crazy. Christians have this idea of what's called a tithe, where it's like you give 10% of your income to like God's stuff, right? He did that in reverse. And I actually remember reading in his book, he said, it's not how much of my money I should give to God, it's how much of God's money am I going to keep for myself. And the purpose of this whole video is just to give you this juxtaposition between a dominating, multi-billion-dollar producing Henry Ford mindset, he's dead. And then this other guy, R.G. LeTourneau, who you maybe never heard of, and he's dead. And like, which one would you pick? It's like, I guess it's a deeply personal question, but there's big differences in how they live their life. And you could argue that Henry Ford was a lot smarter of a businessman. His legacy continued. He had a publicly traded company. The Ford family owns the Detroit Lions. They make more money now than they ever did when Henry Ford was alive. But there's like that, and then there's this guy, RG. He started universities. He built whole cities in like the Amazon jungle and did all these things. Gave away this money, lived this life of radical generosity. He had joy in his heart. He invented stuff that helped people. And, Ford did a lot of really shady stuff. I'm not saying his kids that run the company are like that, but who knows? And when you look back, LeTourneau's faith guided everything that he did. And he shared his success in ways that are just amazing. I look up to it. I aspire to be it. And both guys left a mark. In conclusion, as we get ready to land the plane here, both of these guys left a big dent. They made a mark. Like, people know who they are. Even if you haven't heard of LeTourneau, he was a thing, and he was really famous back then. But man, I don't want this one. I want this one. Which one do you want? When you look at your small business, it's about a lot more than making a buck, right? And I know that that. You want to thrive and not just survive, and you want to do well for your kids and your family and stuff. But what about the level beyond that? You're going to get a nice car? Cool, get a nice car. And what about the level beyond that? If it's just about the material side of it, it's a game that doesn't ever end. And it's a game that you can't actually win. You just keep moving the yardstick and then you die. One of my favorite quotes is that 10 out of 10 people die. So it's like, how do we do something with our life that actually matters while we still can? And so I look to people like R.G. LeTourneau to inspire me to be radically generous, to leave it all in the field, you know? And I'm not perfect at any of this stuff, but it's something to think about, because on the internet, it seems like entrepreneurship education is all about the hustle and the grind and the strategy and the tactic and the angle of how to get ahead and how to, you know, compete instead of collaborate, how to dominate instead of serve. That's what I've been thinking about this week. Hey, if you like this video, like and subscribe. Share me your thoughts in the comments. You know, we're still learning this YouTube thing, and you know, your thoughts and opinions really do matter. We have a small team. We want to make cool stuff that adds value to you, and we'll catch you in the next video.